Good evening. I'm Meg Brignadello. I work for the Office of Innovation Management at OSF. I invite you to join me as we take the next hour to learn more about the journey of what it takes for a husband and wife to create a startup. Tonight, I would like to welcome and introduce Heather and Mike Acerra, the founders of Lux Blox. Lux Blox is a learning tool that teaches children scientific principles through play. Mike and Heather designed and patented the Hinge Trap that allows their new blocks to articulate and move just like in nature. Welcome, Heather and Mike.
Thanks, Meg.
Thank you, Meg.
Happy to have you here. I love the setup with the microphone. You guys are looking great.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
I can. If you could just talk a little bit louder, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So I've really enjoyed getting to know both of you while prepping for this talk, especially because I love the story of just the dynamic of a married couple working side by side to not only work throughout your marriage together, but also build a startup and make your dream come true. So I'd really like to start this talk talking about your family and where you're from.
Sure. I'm from Galesburg, Illinois. I went to Knox College and then I moved to Chicago. And Michael also, he'll tell you where he's from, but he also went to Knox and we kind of re-met in Chicago. So I'll let you tell him about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs in Hillside, Illinois. I grew up in an Italian-American family situation. My dad was a builder. He was a contractor. So I grew up literally not only in the house my dad built, but the block my dad built, all the houses in the block. And our backyard was all shared an adjacent lot with our nursing home, which was our family business. So I grew up in a house of entrepreneurs. My dad was always taking bankers to lunch to try to get a better rate on a CD or another loan to build a house or against his business. We were talking about Italian mafiosos before. We have relations in our family who were my brother's godfather was the godfather. So I knew about that too. So yeah,
that's a lot of entrepreneurship.
There's a lot of entrepreneurship going on. A lot of making. So I went to engineering school for 2 years. I failed terribly at that, but I loved engineering, and so I ended up becoming an art major at Knox College. So and that's where I met Heather.
And I failed to mention, because he gave you a little bit more background, but my dad also, while he was a policeman, he was also a carpenter. So I grew up with a father who was always working as a policeman during the day, but then at night or on the weekends, he would build garages or build houses. He built several of the houses that we lived in. So it's funny because when we reflect on it, we kind of had very different, but somewhat similar upbringings in terms of having that role model, and my dad being a really hard worker and being a builder too.
Absolutely. The genes there for both of you to build something are definitely there. And Mike, I definitely love that we have a similar connection to the Italian family. So it's great. So you guys met then at Knox College, but you didn't date. But did you guys know each other or like cross paths?
Really well. And yeah, we did.
He dated a friend of mine and he was very avant-garde, very artsy, and I was more conservative and political science major, and that sort of thing. And so when we wound up getting engaged out, a few years out of Knox, it was really shocking to people. Like, seriously, so many people, I cannot believe those two are together. It seemed very unlikely. And one of my first bosses, Bob DiNicola, he was like, Heather, I remember when you went on a date with him and you said, oh, he'll be a lot of fun, but there's no way I'd ever marry that guy.
And here you are sitting next to him.
I actually felt sorry for her on our date because she deserved so much better.
Wow. Well, but you guys didn't date though until 5 years after, is that correct?
At least something like that, yeah.
Okay. So in between though, then Mike, you went to live in New York, correct?
Yeah, right after Knox College, I moved to Bodenham, Maine, which is kind of a backwater coastal community. There's like a little two-way river that empties out into Merry Meeting Bay where they make the big, where Bath Iron Works is, where they make the battleships, the big cruisers. And so, but it was kind of like the sticks of Maine. And a friend of mine, Carl Lupitori, a New York artist, moved up there. He moved into an abandoned old chicken processing plant. In the back with the woods were these yurts, these wooden yurts built by some architecture students from Yale 20 years before that. So they look like cupcakes with little holes on top for a window. And so I read my Thoreau, so like on Walden Pond. So I moved out there. I carried my own water, cut my own wood, raised goats, and drew nude models in the evening from Bowdoin College. And I really wanted to pursue some lingering questions I had about how nature puts itself together. So I did a lot of reading, studied my mentor, Buckminster Fuller, the guy who invented the geodesic dome, and kind of came up with a lot of ideas leaving the woods that matured eventually into Lux.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like you're a hands-on type person and really focused on nature.
Yeah.
So then tying into that with Lux Blox, let's build upon that then. So then you guys met, then reconnected 5 years later or so.
Yeah,
And
we were at a poetry slam. I was at a poetry slam with a guy from grad school, and he was really boring. And God bless him, I'm sure he was a super sweet guy, but he didn't have any opinions about anything. And so Michael was there, and he was drawing all the artists, or rather the poets. He was drawing, and so he actually illustrated the only, as far as I know, the only published work of Mark Smith, the founder of the Poetry Slam movement. So anyway, that's how I thought, we reconnected there, and I thought he'd be fun. So
I saw an opportunity and I struck.
did you hop on the stage and do a little poem for Heather or not?
No, he was so bohemian that he said, because I thought it'd be fun. I'm like, oh yeah, where are you now? And he says, well, I just moved. I live in Ukrainian Village, which at that time was pretty sketchy in Chicago. Just moved, and I don't have a phone yet. Back then there were still landlines. And he's like, I don't have a phone, but I've been painting this mural at Frida's restaurant on Damon in Bucktown. He's like, so, I'm usually there. I'm often there. They're paying me in food, and so, you could probably, we can connect there. So my sister and I went to supper there one night, and we were asking about him. They're like, oh, no, he's not there tonight. It was fine. And then I hired all these people from Knox because I was in human resources. I hired like my own club to hang out with on the weekends. So we were, my gang was at my apartment, and he called, and yeah, then we went out after that. So that's the story.
That's the story.
I love it. I love it. And then from there, you guys went to Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and tell us about that, because that's kind of then the start of your idea with Lux Blox, correct?
Well, we like to camp.
Yeah, so we were dating, and we go up there and camp. And again, that was very cheap, but fun and cultural. We would go up there and we camp and go to Shakespeare Theater. They have an outdoor theater.
Spring Green, Wisconsin.
Yeah, Spring Green. And then Taliesin is nearby, which is one of Frank Lloyd Wright's homes. So we did that a few times. We did that several times, both before we were married and after we were married. And that was where we found the book Inventing Kindergarten, which was written by Friedrich Froebel. Rather, it wasn't written by him, but it was about him.
Written by a guy named Brosterman.
Yeah, Brosterman wrote it, but it was about his ideas, his progressive ideas about educating youngsters, and we learned about the set of blocks that he invented, which some really great minds had all played with, and individually they had attributed playing with those blocks as instrumental in their understanding of nature and design. Yeah. So those characters were Buckminster Fuller, Einstein, and Frank Lloyd Wright, and maybe some others, Michael knows better than I, who all felt that playing with these certain blocks it was very formative for them. So we were inspired by that.
Yeah. And we realized that nothing had really been done with toy development in the 20th century since then. Right. Very much like Lego and K'NEX really didn't go very far beyond what they were doing in the 19th century with these things. So we said, well, what do we know now that 19th century Froebel didn't know about technology and about nature, which is a lot, that can go into a new toy. And so we put these 20th century principles into the 21st century block, and like fractal geometry and the behavior of plastic, the dynamic behavior of plastic. And so we came up with Lux Blox.
Yeah, it was really, and it was very iterative. It was a very iterative process because we initially were drawing designs and sending them to a plastics company, and then we'd get the prototypes back, and we'd like, oh well, this doesn't work. Like you would wait weeks, you'd spend $200, and just to find out it doesn't work. So we purchased one of the first 3D printers. It was thousands of dollars. It was like a beta launch, so it kept breaking, and we had to keep calling them to fix it. It was an interesting experience. And so, but we were really, we had all those ideas, but at least for me, my inspiration was that we needed an experience that would kind of break us out of the limitations of bricklaying, because you've got that whole right angle conundrum where, if you go up so far and then you've always got that stair step problem, you can't do things that curve and bend. So, and for me, it was very important that it be very satisfying from a tactile perspective. There was a ton of debate over those 3.5 years regarding, Michael really considered heavily a hub and a node type of connects type where, where you've got these little nodes, and then you fit the longer pieces into it. I hated that. I really felt it was super, super important from just
tell us how you really feel.
Yes, I know, I'm very passionate. So I really wanted to make sure that you had that immediate gratification of, oh, it's fixed together, right? It's attached. I didn't want the idea of I got to put 3 different pieces together. What didn't seem that satisfying to me. So those were some of the things that I cared about.
Yeah.
Right.
Heathers are really good for design. You always want to bring a heather into the equation.
Yeah, I love it. And thinking back, in those beginning stages, you had more of an environment that was kind of, you turned your house though I love your story about your house, because you turned it into like this incubator area just of like almost like free design and play, which also you have 2 children, 2 boys. Right. And so I think some of that raising 2 boys probably also guided the progression of Lux Blox, correct? Your environment in which you had was unique.
We had a homeschool community. So Michael was doing the homeschool thing at home. And so we had all these kids at our disposal that were part of, it was almost like a cottage homeschool group where they'd all come over and Michael would teach Latin. And then another day, a mom would come over and she would teach algebra. So we had this wonderful sort of focus group right there. And we could get a lot of feedback from them. And as well, I'll let you talk about the Young Marines. We also had a youth group that we ran. And so we
ran some Boy Scouts out of the local Catholic school. And then that turned into the Young Marine unit, which was a co-ed military themed unit where the boys and girls wore uniforms and learned Marine Corps manners. And it was wonderful because we always wanted to emphasize nature and bringing them out in the forest and cutting down trees and building things. And we turned our garage into an early maker space. We had power drills and drill presses and saws, and we cut into Legos and Connects and chemistry sets, like the chemistry building sets. And we kind of started innovating. And one of the kids, Daniel, there was a German family that lived across the street from us, German immigrants. It was illegal to homeschool in Germany. It's one of Hitler's laws. It's still in effect. And so they moved to America and were homeschooling their kids across the street, homeschool refugees. And they were brilliant Germans, very prototypical Germans. Like, if you gave them enough money, they'd take over the world. They're very smart and very hardworking and very academic. So Daniel, we did the FRC robotics challenge. We mentored that. And one of the team would get points if one of the kids in the team would learn AutoCAD and illustrate the robot in AutoCAD, that they would award the team points. So Daniel learned AutoCAD. Since I'm a portrait painter, I told Heather, those ideas we had, I can draw Daniel the idea. He could put it in AutoCAD and we could print the idea and test it. And then Heather told you about the early iteration that we were hiring people to print it. Then we bought a printer. We got so fast at prototyping that sometimes we have 3 iterations a day where I give Daniel a drawing in the morning, he'd make the drawing, we'd print it, and we do that 2 more times before the evening. And that's how fast we started to develop these ideas.
That's impressive. And, Mike, you were doing this, you were the stay-at-home dad, and Heather, you were the executive mom. I mean, the dynamic of your marriage and startup life, I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, it had to have some challenges, correct?
Absolutely. It's very tiring to have 2 jobs, you know what I mean? And then be a mom and, clean and cook and do all
And we were those crazy parents where we wanted our kids to be classical musicians and learn a language and do this. So we had cellos and violins and pianos and organs going all the time. Luke had a band, a Young Marine band. He was leading that would travel all over the place. So it was a crazy environment. It was really nuts.
Yeah.
So would you go to work and then come home to see all of like the house and all of the drawings and the mess of just exploratory?
Yeah, our
Yeah.
house is
It just-
always messy,
it's-
and I'm
I
not
love
a
it.
person, so I
Yeah.
really don't like
It
it. But
stunk
that's the
of
way it is.
melted plastic and garlic and resin from guitars and
It makes it
violins, and
sound so poetic,
it
but
was
it really
and
wasn't.
oil
Yeah.
paint. It was beautiful.
I know. I just want to come hang out over your house now. Like, it's great. That's so great. Well, then really 2012 was the big spark, correct? And that's when you guys put it together more so for Lux Blox, correct?
Yeah, the Eureka moment happened. My mom needed a new liver. She found out that she had hepatitis from my sister's birth back in the 60s. A lot of her generation got hepatitis from blood transfusions. So that's just a little backstory. And that's why I was in Chicago, because I thought I might be a match. And I was sitting at my mom's table and I was trying to figure out how you could make a hinge, which is like usually doors have pins for hinges, right? Like they put the pin through the door. How can you make a pinless hinge? Like two identical pieces could be snapped together and they'll form a hinge that's not there, like a magical hinge. And I was putting my fingers together and I had a Eureka moment. I called Heather up and said, I think I just invented something. I better start drawing pictures. And so from there, we did our first provisional patent. And then later on, it turned into a formal patent, then another patent after that. So, but yeah, so we figured out that we had done, then we had approved that it had never been patented before. And we got into, and then the American attorneys were arguing with the German attorneys about, it's not like Zimmerman's and it's not like Miragashi's. And finally we got patented.
Wasn't there a Ziegler too?
There was a Ziegler too. And
That's
so
my maiden name.
we ended up getting patented all over the world. So, but that took a while.
But that was a challenge.
Oh yeah.
You guys went through some rough moments with that. What was that like?
Well, it was just annoying to me because he would always run out and put in the patent like every iteration before it was final, and we spent a lot of money on that. And so his defense all the time was, oh, but we learned so much, and and I'm like, no, you could have waited, but whatever, it's past, I'm over that. But the one thing that's interesting, I will say about the patent, well, he owns a patent and I'm 100% owner of the business. He does give me credit and he's done it enough online, so if I ever need to take legal action, I am the one who insisted on the hermaphroditic. I want it to be male and female. So he gives me credit for that. But yeah, it's definitely a collaboration.
Yep. Which is the Hinge Trap, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us more about that. I mean, why is that so important to you? What was so important about that female and male?
Well, the thing, go ahead.
Say.
Okay.
I want to say, because my instinct the whole time was that something about if you have both male and female, I just knew, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I just knew intuitively if you have both male and female, you're more likely to be able to break out of the right angle conundrum. He's the one who took it and made it into the trap and the pinless hinge, but I just knew that male and female, somehow I knew that was going to add a balance and a symmetry to the project that was going to add a versatility.
Yeah, and she ended up being more right than she ever really realized. I mean, she was very kind of lucky that way. But yeah, she was really right. I'm still kind of pissed off about it, but she was really right.
Here comes the Italian side.
No, but so what it enabled, and I'll give you a little blow up of it. So this is the Hinge Trap. This is it. There's an egg. Maria Volpe gave the egg in the nest. You didn't want to tell little kids that's the male and that's the female. Of course, the male goes in the female, kids. You don't want to do that, right? So Maria Volpe said that's the egg and that's the nest. And little birdie puts the egg in the nest. So when these go together, they make a very strong hinge. Okay. Much stronger than a magnet. I mean, magnets are really expensive. So this imitates basically what a magnetic edge does, but it's much stronger. So that's how we did that. And, so that enabled you to make a sheet of blocks that looks like a fabric that will actually roll up like a fabric. And the importance of that is in nature works in cells, and the cells form membranes, and the membranes have the elastic ability. But when a membrane wants to be rigid, all it does is curl up and it becomes very rigid, right? And that rigidity is called corrugation. That's a physical principle. And that's what we want kids to be exposed to, because when Elon Musk makes his rocket so light and strong, he's taking very thin metal and folding it. So those spaceships weigh next to nothing, and he puts those strong engines. Same with airplanes and cars. They take sheet metal and they fold it. So we wanted kids to have a fabricating experience through building with their hands.
That's right. So that allows us to build in a more modern way. We don't build our airplanes or our rockets out of bricks, obviously.
Yep.
So this type of construction is known as tensile construction. And what that means is that most of the strength is in that outer layer, that the skin, skin, if you will. Yeah.
And what happened was, which was really interesting, is once we made the block and we were prototyping the block, it started to exhibit behaviors that we didn't anticipate. Okay, which is, you're onto something good when it starts teaching you stuff. Like our invention started teaching us. We didn't even know after a while what we even invented, because we're like, what the heck is? So these are mostly just squares, right? But look what it does.
Wow, that's cool.
Totally elastic. And then
I wish I had one right now to just play with while we're talking.
Great fidgets. And then this happened.
Uh-huh.
And then this scales, of course, longwise, but it also scales this way. So it modulates space. So it generates its own patterns in order that you never would anticipate by one square. This is all made out of squares, okay? But these squares create like a creature that imitates muscle cells. It contracts.
Which is why when we first launched the product, we only had a mold that made squares. We initially went out with squares because the squares can make a prism of any size. And believe it or not, we got into the National Museum of Math, which is very well regarded in Manhattan. And we did a custom line of the solids, the Archimedean solids, and the platonic solids, and it was all with squares, because even though it's made with square units, you're able to make those prisms and make shapes of all those geometries. So
yeah, so it gives kids all this freedom. So you put 5 together, it'll make a little pentagon or a house or a trapezoid, right? And if you put 3 together, of course, it'll make a triangular prism. So kids get all this freedom that nature has of this crystal geometry.
Which is so important anymore. I feel like I'm a mom of 2 kids, and just play is so important, but also just the tactile piece of of Lux Blox, and that exposure to just how nature is and just the freeness of it as well, and being able to create, it's important.
Yeah, here's an example of a little antenna. It's like a little parabola, right? So it opens up. You can see that right there. Yeah. It's like a little cone, but look how it squishes down. It's totally squishy. So kids feel under their fingers this squish, but that squish is happening with a hard object. So it's mechanically reducing concepts like squish and pliability, okay? Which we think is really important. It's giving kids a kinesthetic connection to how nature is actually working, its operating principles.
How many of those do you have around your house, by the way?
I mean, we have so many.
We have so many. The toys? Well, we moved across the street, no building across the street.
Yeah, we have a warehouse across the street now, which is fantastic.
Thank God, yeah.
Is it full of already assembled Lux Blox and like
gosh, you need to come over here, because there's a whole section which is like giant models that were like abandoned, and they're like taken apart halfway and stuff like that.
Because we're always challenging ourselves. Like we'll see, like when COVID came out, some Finnish educators said, "Could Lux make COVID?" I was like, "Well, that's a good question, because I know there's virus structure." So we tried to build COVID, and we ended up building like the interior of the cell, the endoplasmic reticulum, and then we started building polypeptides, and we're like, wow, it does like the building blocks of the cells too.
DNA, helix.
So there's these things everywhere. I feel like I'm the guy. My hair's growing out now. I'm becoming like the guy Doc in Back to the Future. I'm feeling more like him every day, acting like him too.
I find that so
Can you build the car, please, with Lux Blox?
Doc is sexy.
So you wouldn't have gotten the awards and been in the museum without really, you started the Hinge Trap, and that was the beginning, and you guys started to really scale. And with that, I know, some of those first trade shows, those were kind of important for you just to build the foundation and get exposure. And I know it was kind of eye-opening. So can you tell us about your first trade show?
Well, our first trade show was in Charlotte. right? North
Charlotte,
Carolina.
yeah.
It was Astra. It was the American Specialty Toy Retailers Association, and we sold, I think, like $10,000 worth of product at that show. And our video with the hands demonstrating all that the block can do, you know, kind of went viral.
Made by Raphael Rodolfi of Peoria, Illinois.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant. Shout out to Raphael. But so that we went out pretty big, and that was kind of excited. We got picked up by a couple of the larger retailers. But what we didn't really recognize, or we kind of started in our first few years out, was that we were actually launching under a model that was quickly changing. The whole model you see that we had we had several sales reps, and the sales reps would go to different stores, little stores, and say, hey, do you want to buy this product? And they'd take their 10%, and we're selling wholesale, and that we were pretty new at. We were inventors, but we weren't really experts at what's the best packaging and things like that. We had beautiful packaging, but it didn't necessarily always resonate because we didn't have it's very hard, as you can see from interviewing us. It would be very difficult to convey the value proposition of all this motion and this plasticity in a box, right?
With a picture,
yeah. So once, even though, we went out big, didn't always resonate, once it got on the shelves. And then on top of that, like I said, everything was moving to Amazon. Amazon was extremely ascendant. So we were right in the middle of this huge change. From the time that we launched, multiple of the stores or the chains, small to mid, are out of business, one bankrupt. Many of those sales rep groups don't exist any longer.
Oh yeah.
And so we really needed to figure out, what we were going to do, how we were going to change things up. So.
Right. Yeah. So we pivoted from selling to brick and mortar small toy stores to eventually pivoting into education.
Yeah. And that was after we had sold to one of the pivotal moments was we had sold to a pretty well-known retailer, and we were very excited about that. And we were in their test stores, and they watch, how your sales are doing and so forth. But that month that we landed in that very large, popular chain was the same month that Toys R Us announced that they were closing all their stores. So this was very difficult for a little small company like us, because now we had all those manufacturers that had name recognition that were all knocking on the doors of just that type of store so that they could get into that big box space, because a lot of your large toy companies were still in that mode of really relying on brick and mortar. Yeah. So that was kind of what really pushed us over the edge of, oh my gosh, we need to really rethink our approach here. And that's when I had talked to a woman who had met at Barnes & Noble, Meet the Inventor, Mentor Day. She'd kind of been following us, and she spent 3 hours on the phone with me because I was pretty upset. I was near rock bottom. I was like, what are we doing? I've invested all this money, all my retirement in this, and this may have not been the way to go. And
that's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was stressful. But she said, hey, Heather, send me your new parts, because we had developed parts just for these products that we developed for this retail chain. And we sent her the parts, and she got back to me and she said, Heather, I don't want to give you a big head, but these are brilliant. These are genius. And you need to get back to your whole reason for doing this, which is education. You wanted to create something to teach kids through play. So Michael's demonstrating some of the parts, and every part, we only have 7 parts in our inventory. We have we have the square, the triangle, basic blocks, and we have 2 different size squares, or rather wheels that also double as gears or pulleys, and they have the different hubs that is each block will focus on the hub, and then we have axles that go with it. But my point with that was that she just really convinced me and Michael that we should go towards education. So we actually went up to Chicago. I have a dear friend, Rachel, who is an excellent educator. In fact, she and Michael taught in Chicago public schools together, and they were hysterical. They did some funny things. But anyway, she locked us in her apartment, and we forced Michael to go through all the different education standards, K through 8, to try and determine if there were specific learning objectives that we could support through the use of Lux. And that kind of got our brain going in terms of what size sets we would need, and developing more content to support use in the classroom. So we don't have a lot of huge we don't really have a ton of huge formal curriculum. We have a lot of videos that will teach, our kids when they're younger and their friends, teaching you how to make various shapes. We plan to add more in terms of that. But we have these classroom sets that are they tend to be used more like in maker spaces and things like that. But they're great enrichment for the schools. So we're continuing to go down that path, while also then the other thing, obviously, logically, as brick and mortar is descendant, obviously, digital marketing and marketplaces are all that's happening. So we're pretty excited because we've been really teaching ourselves quite a bit more about digital marketing. Our oldest son is home from school, and he's committed to learning along with us and devoted to helping us really continue along with that strategy.
That's so great. And while you guys were pivoting, that's a full-time job to pivot your, the whole business, but you're still working, you're raising family. I mean, that had to have been a challenge in itself. And here you guys are.
Yeah, I mean, we work all the time. Sometimes it's tiring. I mean, I had my first vacation in 5 years over 4th of July. I went to visit a friend for a long weekend in Alabama. It was wonderful. I actually read a book. It was lovely. So yeah, we work a lot, but at least, we know it's worth it. We think it's worth it.
It's soul crushing and ego pulverizing. The process is going to a trade show in a smoky, windowless casino off the airport strip in Las Vegas.
Yes.
The most miserable place in the world, where obese women in their 80s in wheelchairs on oxygen tanks are playing video games all night long. You're in this place selling to people who don't give a crap about anything we just talked about at all. And it's depressing. I mean, it was selling to toy stores was really hard. And the woman in New York was so right. She said, you guys ought to listen to your own story, because you're really not toy makers. You're a learning company. That's where your heart is. And that was the best advice we ever got.
And it's not to say, I mean, if you, from a pure market perspective, the toy market is huge, $6 billion just in the US in terms of construction toys. So we know that is, and we know we're fun. It's not like we're just this boring education. We're really, really fun.
Yeah.
But it's just that our message and the utility of our block really lends itself to the education space. So that's a natural to sort of anchor us. And since we've been focusing on that, we're definitely making headway in that space. And we're going to continue to work that and if you consider, the sales timing, the sales cycles on education are very different than obviously toy, which is all fourth quarter. It's all Christmas and a little bit Easter. So we can have the two focuses in tandem and continue to, work different sets devoted to each of those markets. I think that's, I don't know, I think it's a good move. It seems to be paying off. It's not overnight, but we're definitely making a really nice, upward trajectory.
You guys have, sorry, go ahead.
We learned the hard way that, inventing a product is not running a business. It's a completely different thing. And that you could have what happened? Did we lose you?
Nope, you guys are still there.
So again, so we've been learning as we go that it's really important to all, and we were mentored by really great people like Leland from Bump Box and Peoria and other people.
Yes.
Really taught, and then we did the Brave launch out of Bradley, and they taught us that you really need to learn you need to always focus on fundamental principles of business, like knowing who your ideal customer is. And if you don't know that, find out, learn it. So you're always learning how to learn and how to and ask your customer questions about why they like the product and where they come from, what are they. And so we're always doing that. And we've been getting down to our DNA of our business again with our new bigger staff and probing the market and trying to figure out where our ideal customers are, who they are, where they are, and how we get to them and how we spend our money wisely.
Yeah, it's really important to understand your target market for sure.
Yeah.
And you guys have, being in the education space, I've talked about this, just having a child with special needs. I love that your Lux Blox was the top STEM toy by the Center on Autism and Related Disorders in Los Angeles. So you're able to touch so many children and enrich so many lives, whether it's typical or non-typical developing children. I mean, you've got such a great idea, and I'm just happy to have this night with you just to learn more and share it as well with our viewers. And I'd really like to, Mike, I'm going to put you off to the side for a second and really more focus on Heather, because it's so great. We can come back on the screen. Other viewers out there are female entrepreneurs, and I just want to know more about you. I called this little segment "The Woman Behind the Man." But what would you say to other female entrepreneurs that are embarking on this journey to create something new?
Well, I've always been, I love people and relationships and meeting new people and helping. So I was a career services director briefly. The one time I wasn't in HR, and I really love helping people. And I do that now as a vocation. So if anybody needs help with a resume or job search, I love to do that. So I feel that when you are a helping person, you don't always ask for help. So it's really important to ask for help, to reach out to your network, there are so many people that are willing to support you. And it's the same advice that I've often given to people who are looking for a job or career direction is, don't be afraid to call someone up and ask for advice, because most people will willingly give it. Everybody loves to be valued, and most people like that feeling of help. So that is one of the number one things is don't be afraid to talk to people, ask for help, leverage your networks. And that's been very helpful for us because, as Michael said earlier, you have to learn so much. There's so many things that you never anticipated. Well, perhaps other people are more strategic when they set out to start a business. We went about inventing something. And then it was, oh yeah, let's put it out there. Let's sell it, Whereas I think a lot of people, especially kids coming out of business school today, are going to approach it a lot more strategically. And that's one of our lessons. So I guess that would be a lesson that I would have as well, is if you have a great idea, before you invest a lot of money in a particular market or particular strategy, do your research. And that's the other, just super practical, whether you're a man or a woman starting a business, do as much research as possible so that you can hone in on your target market and the best means by which to reach them.
I really like your first statement though, of just asking for help. I feel like as females, I do it. You nailed it. I feel like I was just getting like a pep talk from you of like, it's okay to ask people for help, or if you don't know something, it's okay to leverage those relationships. And I think just being a female, being moms, that's hard to do. You want to do it all. You don't want to show any sign of weakness, and it's not a weakness. It's just, it's inherent of us. I feel like it's part of our nature of just, we got to do it. But I think that's a really important thing, just making sure that you reach out and leverage those connections and ask for help when you need it. I'm sure that you faced some, not only the challenges together, but challenges as being a female entrepreneur. Have you faced any big challenges with being a female and building a business specifically?
I can't say that I have faced any challenges. Like, I haven't run into anything I would perceive as sexism per se, or anything other than my own expectations. So I think we alluded to that earlier, is you want to do absolutely everything perfectly and really well. And with Michael at home, he's not the neatest person. And I mean, there's certain things you just have to let go. It's like, okay, we made a choice. His idea about what a clean house is and mine are totally different. And, sometimes you just have to let those things go. Things aren't always going to be perfect, and you do the best you can, and try to relax occasionally.
Totally. And for all those female entrepreneurs that are starting this, that maybe are afraid of failure, what advice would you like to share with them?
Well, I mean, everyone's risk tolerance is different. And I would have never imagined I would have put so much of my own personal savings into something like this. If you'd asked me this 20 years ago, I would have said, you got to be crazy. I wouldn't do that. But my feeling is, if you feel passionate about something, and you really believe in it, and of course, check yourself. I mean, does it look like there's an audience or a market for it? And if that's the case, then, I mean, we only live once, right? You only live once. So I think I cannot imagine looking back on my life, having had a great idea or having gone so far as to invent something that that you believe could really help people, and then not taking the risk to bring it to market. What a way. I couldn't imagine looking back on my life and say, oh, I could have done this, but I didn't try. So that's just me personally. Some people don't have that level of risk tolerance, but my feeling is I'd rather take a risk. You know, at the very least, my kids will have some very interesting stories to tell their children, that they had these eccentric parents, and, you know, will live on in our family folklore. But to me, you know, you got to take a chance, or, you know, what's life about?
That is so true. So after all of the hardships, would you do it all over again?
Ask me that in a couple years. I mean, I'd say yes, but you know, it's hard. It's stressful. And honestly, the answer to that question almost depends on what I'm encountering that day. Because there are some days I would say, heck no, give me back my whole 401k and, you know, an easy life with vacations on a regular basis and that kind of I would say yes, but that's not to say that that there aren't days when I say heck no.
Yeah. I don't blame you. So Mike, come on back. Hello. I touched upon this a little bit earlier. I just think the dynamic of your business is very compelling. And I have a feeling that we have other viewers out there that are in the same boat of not only are they they're constantly working on their relationship and marriage, but then they're also maybe starting a new business together. And you had a non-traditional opportunity. Mike, you were the stay-at-home dad, and Heather, you were the executive mom. There had to have been some challenges with that, but you did it. And what do you think made it all work?
I think it's kind of like Donnie and Marie.
Are you going to elaborate?
No.
Except for Donnie and Marie weren't married. They were brother and sister.
What to say? Well, that makes it interesting. Heather, what's your point of view?
I think he's trying to say basically that we both have different talents that complement one another. You know,
That's exactly what I
and
meant.
it's not to say that there aren't things that, oh my gosh, we definitely annoy each other so much. And honestly, there are companies like the Hoberman Sphere. I mean, I think that couple, I could be totally wrong, but I'd heard that their marriage didn't last after launching that one. That's really the truth. I mean, so many marriages that try to have a business together, it's incredibly stressful. And as much as you may love someone, to spend that much time with someone and then to be working through such very, serious monetary issues, and whether or not to take a risk or that risk, and who, you know, whose fault was that bad decision or what have you. I mean, it's really
you have to take turns lighting each other's hair on fire. Like if her hair is on fire, I'm the cool guy, right? And she's like, how could you not be so worried? We're gonna lose our everything. And then, you know, when I'm in Las Vegas by myself at this horrible convention, I go and watch some movie and drown my sours in seafood and beer, and I'm so sad. And so we all handle our stress differently. You know what I mean? And
totally. But you probably had different outlets. Like what, like maybe made it all work? You know, did you like have time? Did you just build out times that maybe you had different hobbies that you could do just to, you know, make sure? Because I mean, that's a lot. You were working all the time, and then you guys are under the same household.
We don't go on vacations. We don't
go
yeah.
on vacations. The closest thing to a hobby I would say is exercising. Like that's a hobby. I mean, but that's all I really have time to do. And I used to have a lot more hobbies. And I'm a reader at my church, a lector. And so that's important. I always make time for that.
No, the truth though is Heather and I both really get jazzed when we work with children and see how excited they are. Kids are so brutally honest. And when we did focus groups, when we had an early toy, it wasn't the same toy. They were just gruesomely honest. They would say the most hurtful things. And so when we finally got Lux and we put it in front of kids all over the country, universally, the kids just went, you know, crazy over it. And then when we got the feedback about kids with autism and other kind of disorders, like Niblock, you know, some of our core customers are like teenage boys that have autism, and they do amazing things. Their parents will tell us.
Totally brilliant.
Yeah. So, and that was unintended. So yeah, things like that really warm us and make everything worthwhile. for me, right?
I just have to tell a little, when we were still pretty new, we go to these shows and we'd have a PlayStation. We just have a table, and it was so inspirational with these kids. They'd be there for hours, and it's like
They had to be there.
a community festival. And mom and dad are done now. They want to go, and so they'll say, "Come on, Junior." The kids are just like, they're like totally focused. They're building. Come on, Junior. It's time to go. And they were ignoring their parents. They'll say, "Come on, let's go get some pizza," and they keep building, and they won't go. Hey, how about we go get some ice cream? They're totally trying to get them ice cream, pizza. We hear all this. And then literally the parents will be, come on, the kids won't leave.
Drugs work.
We've had their parents grab them and drag them away while they're crying and throwing a fit because they want to keep playing with Lux
We
Blox.
love that.
And I'm like, I love it.
What a good feeling. And kids are the toughest critics. Let's be real. If you get their attention and you get them locked in, then you've won in my book.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys are definitely, just from your story and just how you both, your mannerisms right now, you can tell like all you want to do is give back and like make a difference and enrich children's lives and help them grow, because that's what you're doing. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so neat. What advice though would you give to parents that are maybe in this non-traditional setting of just the roles are reversed a little bit mek?
Well, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. I think that we're given a lot of free time, you know. So if only one spouse is working, the other one's at home, that's a workout. That's an opportunity, right? So if it's not coming up with a business idea, it could be like learning Italian or something else. So there's always that. So it's always like look at the opportunity in front of you, right? So whatever it is, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. I think that there are people who are predisposed to entrepreneurship, and other people probably ought to be firefighters. You know, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say, it's not. It's becoming, I guess, more popular or more common for, you know, a man to stay home and be the primary caretaker for the children. For us, it was, you know, a little bit financial because, you know, Michael is an artist, an art instructor, and a teacher. He's very good at all those things. But, you know, when it came right down to it, we wanted our kids to be home with a parent. And then when you added the extra layer of education, we had a very specific way we wanted our kids to be educated that had a foundation in classical education and the music. That was all very important to us. So that was a sacrifice we made rather than have two parents work, which is again very common, because we had a very specific way we wanted to bring up our kids, and it just made more sense because I made more money for him to be the one who did it. And, you know, I would have gladly done it, but this is just the way it worked out.
Well, I love it. And sorry, Mike, to put you off to the side one more time. Just being a female, I know with my daughter, it's really important to show my daughter that, you know, I have something that I'm proud of, that I'm working for, and to feel empowered about. And I think just you've done a wonderful job. Both of you have done a great job. So hang in there. Keep on going. And I'd like to know though, you know, one thing that we did talk about, and I want to share with viewers, what's next for Lux Blox, especially thinking about your boys and your family and maybe bringing them through the ranks.
Oh, sure. So we're really, really excited to have our oldest son, Luke, working with us now. And we're just really focused on upping our social media and digital marketing game. And while he's by no means an expert, he's got that enthusiasm and that thirst for knowledge. So, and he's you know, did filmmaking when he was younger, you know, and these sorts of things. So, I know he'd like to do a YouTube channel where he really focuses on a small, short science lessons that we can utilize Lux Blox in. That is one thing that we plan to do, but he's also looking, you know, with a more critical eye, working with our other marketing person on just upping our game across the board with social media, which is super important.
Yeah, really boosting that next generation and getting them tied in.
Yep.
That's great. Well, thank you for everything this evening. It's been so great to hear your story. It's so inspiring. I do have one last question for you. And what advice can you share with others who are maybe feeling that they are stuck or overwhelmed with their innovation journey, especially given the times that we're in?
Their innovation journey?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my thought would be, believe me, I have felt so overwhelmed at times. So I think the most important thing is to realize you can only do one thing at a time, in spite of what people say, and break these daunting tasks down into smaller pieces. And I mean, okay, this could be the same advice in business as well. But when you have, for instance, oh my gosh, we need to really up our game with social media. Okay, let's step this out. You know, what do we need to do? Do we need to first begin with collecting a little more data on our customers so we can really hone in? Let's start with that. What means are we going to use? And then you build out from there.
Right.
So when something looks like too large and overwhelming, which is so frequently the case when you have your own business, to break it down into smaller sequential steps. I think that's a really important thing to do.
And it goes down to first principles, like Elon Musk always likes to talk about. So checking your assumptions, you know, you write them all down. And I assume this to be true, and this to be true, and this to be true about my product, and about my savings, about whatever it is, all the ingredients, right? And my outlook. I really think that people love, you know, hearts at Christmas time. I'm going to make heart ornaments because everyone loves hearts with kitties on them, or whatever it's going to be, right? And then you should go and you should start asking people what they think about my assumptions, and go to experts, you know, all kinds of experts, and hopefully they disagree with each other. But what you need to do is you need to find out how true your assumptions are, how they hold up against reality, and that it'll be hurtful because, you know, in art, I came from an art background, so in art, you know that you can't suffer from a thing called preciousness. You can't love the first thing you make. You got to know you got to destroy it and do it again and again and again. Great potters break a lot of their pots because they're trying to perfect it. So perfection isn't actually a good thing, and it requires destruction. And so you should just try to destroy all these assumptions you have and see if you can make them better.
Just go at it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Heather and Mike, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I really hope that I get to come and see all of the Lux Blox warehouse, different configures that you've made. I'd love to come visit you guys. You guys have been so fun to get to know. Definitely for all our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Please check out Lux Blox at luxblox.com. You can also read about their story, and there should be a link on the Facebook page for Distillery Labs, and as well on LinkedIn. So definitely check it out and reach out if you'd like to get connected to Heather and Mike. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next Whiskey Talk. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.